We're going to be ranking the top 30 fights in the UFC in 2024. Let me quickly go through the 5 categories of this tier list. So for the Hood Classic, type of fights where you show your friends who are non-MMA fans, if you want to give them an example of what they're missing out, these are the type of fights you show. They include everything. It's a war, and for the most part, it does end with a finish. Bangers of a fight, years to come, you will go back and talk about this fight. So things like that. And then for the need to rewatch, these are the fights that you absolutely need to go back to rewatch. No matter how long it takes, eventually you will think about this fight and you want to go back. If there's a UFC drought and you're looking for fights to go back on, these are the fights that you go to. Now, the might watch category is like just less of the need to rewatch. There were bangers, there were good fights in the moment, but you might forget about them. So it's like 50-50. You don't absolutely need to watch it, but there's a potential where you go back to watch these fights. The one-sided bangers. These are pretty much like the might rewatch fights, but for the most part, you were watching a performance of one of the fighters. The last category is the decent fights. These are the fights where they're not boring, they're not bad, but they're decent. You know, you don't need to go back to watch it. You can watch them because they're close and you want to see who won for yourself. But as time goes on, you forget about the details of this fight. You're not really missing out. And I don't want to hear anybody talking about, oh, yeah, you have recency bias on this fight and that fight, whatever. Look, guys, I watched all 30 fights. I rewatched them again before making this video, so I have recency bias on every single fight. I'm not over here acting like, oh, that was some hard work. I did enjoy watching the fights, but please go ahead and just like the video because I did put a lot of effort to create this content. The first fight we're going to go over is Sean Strickland versus Dricus Du Plessis. Now, this was a decent fight. Not the most impressive or exciting fight, you know, but it wasn't boring, you know. It was a very, very close fight, and I did have Dricus winning the fight. And after watching the fight, I still have Dricus winning the fight, even though a lot of people believe Strickland won that fight. It's pretty much the same thing happening all over and over again. The whole 5 rounds, jabs, hooks from both guys, kicks and takedowns from Dricus, mixing it up. Round 1, round 2, all the way to round 5, same circle going on. So both guys fought smart, you know, and they were technically sound, and there was constant action in the fight. It wasn't boring, constant action, back and forth. So there was never a dull moment in the fight, so which makes it, you know, a decent fight. So with that being said, when you put everything together, you know, the way the fight went, the same thing happening over and over again. There wasn't really this wow or exciting moment. You absolutely have to put this as a decent fight on the tier list. Next fight, we got Volkanovski versus Topuria. Man, this right here was a very intense fight, but I do have to it was hard, you know, choosing this one between need to watch and might rewatch. This was one of the most intense fights I've ever watched. Like I said, I feel like I was pretty much watching Volkanovski avoid the inevitable storm that was coming. Volk had the volume while Topuria had the power, you know, same old story. I just knew once Topuria landed a clean shot, that would be the end. That's exactly what happened. But, you know, a good back and forth fight as long as it lasted. Action packed, constant action, back and forth. It did end with a finish. There were very high stakes in this fight as it was for the featherweight belt. Nobody has beat Volkanovski in featherweight especially since he became a champion. One of the GOATs, or if not the GOAT, in featherweight. And Topuria just took him out. Like I said, a high tense fight. Back and forth. There wasn't a dull moment. You were just watching to see what was gonna happen. You couldn't take your eyes off it. Topuria landing heavy shots, Volkanovski landing volume, things like that. and then ending in a sad but fantastic finish. So with putting all that together, this is absolutely a need to watch fight. It's something that I believe you should go back to watch whenever you want to rewatch fights and just relive that moment. Next fight on the list, Robert Whitaker versus Paulo Costa. Now, this was straight up action from round one, no doubt. Costa landing 3 beautiful head kicks in round one and rocking Robert Whitaker in round one. He was pretty much saved by the bell, if you're being honest. But then going into round two, Whitaker started landing nice overhead shots, constant back and forth from both guys. Costa still landing head kicks, but Whitaker landing a lot of strikes. This was a very, very good performance from Robert Whitaker. Seeing him come back from being rocked in round one and slowly stealing the round, it was fascinating to watch that, you know. But like I said, he did have a lot of action, a lot of back and forth, but the biggest moment was the head kick in round one. And then after that, you know, it was pretty much just a, you know, a good striking match. But in my opinion, you're not really missing a lot if you don't watch this fight. You know, it's pretty much a very good fight, but it's not bad to rewatch it, but you're not really missing out if you don't watch it, if that makes sense. So this, in my opinion, has to be in a might rewatch category. Next, we have O'Malley versus Vera 2. Now, come on. I don't even have to say a lot for this one. If you've watched this fight, you know this was an absolute one-sided banger. This was one of Sean O'Malley's most impressive performances. He put on a striking clinic. I remember after this fight, a lot of people were putting Sean O'Malley up there with Israel Adesanya and Alex Pereira as one of the best strikers in the UFC. It was a virtuoso masterclass striking performance, and Chito Vera didn't do anything at all, honestly speaking. He took a lot of shots, took a lot of damage, but he just has a very impressive and strong chin. But it was all Sean O'Malley. This was like pretty much what he calls the sugar show, him on full display. So it wasn't a great fight on its own, but it was a fantastic performance from Sean O'Malley. And if you really want to see Sean O'Malley perform his skills against another striker, because Chito Vera is a good striker as well, this is a fight you will go back to watch. So with that being said, this has to be considered a one-sided banger for sure. Next on the list, we have Gilbert Burns versus Jack Della Maddalena. Man, this was a dynamic fight to watch. It included everything pretty much. Grappling and striking, and then ended up with a finish. So it's like, you know, what more can you ask for? But you know, like I said, it was fun and it was interesting because Burns was actually winning this fight. He was actually winning this fight. But eventually Jack ended up knocking him out, which was an impressive thing to see. Jack landing a knee to Burns' head and then landing crazy ground and pound strikes till the ref stopped it. So it was not a fight I'd say you need to watch, if I'm being honest, but it's a fight where you consider going back to whenever you feel like and rewatching a good fight. If you just want to rewatch a good fight, this is it. But it's not really something where, man, you missed that fight, I can't believe you're an MMA fan if you missed that fight. Or it's not a pure example, it's not the best example to show to your non-MMA fans to watch, to try to get them to see what the UFC is about. But it was a decent fight, so this has to go into the might rewatch category. It's hard picking between this fight and Robert Whitaker versus Paulo Costa. I feel like Robert Whitaker versus Paulo Costa was more interesting as a fight as a whole, but the fact that Gilbert Burns was winning the fight and then Jack came back and knocked him out made it impressive. You know, a better ending with a finish. But I think it will come in second after Costa versus Whitaker. Right, so next we have Brandon Allen versus Chris Curtis 2. Now this straight up, I'm just gonna say this. It's going to be a might rewatch category. I mean, the fight was fun and included both grappling and striking. It was a very grueling fight at the end. Both guys were exhausted. Chris Curtis was hurt. I think he tore his hamstring or something like that. And at the end of the fight, it ended up being a brawl, an absolute banger, a very close fight. So that is why it comes into this list. Fully action-packed fight, slowly got better, and it was a very, very close fight. The judges gave it to Allen, which in my opinion was the right call, but I believe it was a split decision. But with that being said, again, it's something you might rewatch. It's not a bad fight to rewatch, but it's not the most hyped, crazy fight ever. So we're gonna put it in the might rewatch rankings. All right, so next we have Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway, co-main event of UFC 300. Now, this was a very, very complicated fight to rank. Actually, the finish of this fight absolutely falls in the Hood Classic category. But the reason why I don't think it's appropriate to put this in the Hood Classic is, if you're being honest, it was more like a one-sided fight, because Max Holloway was pretty much winning every single round, piecing Justin Gaethje up in that fight. Now, one of the greatest fights of all time because of the finish, arguably the greatest finish of all time, honestly speaking. But the fight as a whole was just decent, honestly speaking. So it's like fighting between the one-sided banger and Hood Classic. It's very complicated. With a combination of a decent fight with a Hood Classic ending knockout, this will fall in the need to watch category, because the ending of the fight, right? It makes it worth it to watch the whole fight, to watch how we built up to that moment. Max Holloway didn't even need to do all that pointing to the octagon, shenanigans. He was winning the whole fight dominantly. He could have just coasted the last round and it would have been a good win. But the fact that ending, he pointed to the ground and they just went to the middle and threw it all in, and he literally KO'd Justin Gaethje at the last second. Awesome moment, the best moment in 2024. So it's definitely a fight you need to watch specifically for that moment. Next fight on the list, Zell Huber versus Hrgović. Man, talk about banger. This is arguably the best fight in 2024, honestly speaking. This fight was an absolute banger. Straight up action-packed fight from start to finish. A total striker's delight, honestly speaking, and an absolutely close fight as well. So it has everything. Of course, no grappling, but man, it was a striker's delight. Like I said, the fight could have gone anywhere, honestly, but round 3 was absolutely amazing. Hrgović throwing almost 1,000 punches. I might be exaggerating, but so many strikes, so many punches, and Zell Huber not giving up, showing that Mexican toughness, and swinging back, landing good shots, and then it ended up being back and forth, and then till the end it kept on going back and forth. Look, guys, if there's one fight you need to watch in 2024 or period, this is it. This was absolute chaos and action-packed, and it didn't even end in a finish, but it was so good. Such a close fight. This fight, in my opinion, best fight of the year. So obviously this is an instant Hood Classic. Probably the most Hood Classic, honestly speaking, but we have so many more fights to go over, so there might be one better. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Is this the best fight of the year? We're still gonna go through other fights, so you can also let me know as well. But yeah, no doubts, this is a Hood Classic. Next fight, we have Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. Man, it's amazing that Topuria is ending on this list at least twice, which shows you the type of hair he had. Now, this, in my opinion, was a very good fight. Honestly, it's not my opinion. It was a good fight for as long as it lasted again. So it was a very similar fight to Volk versus Tuporia. You know, what I liked about this fight is Ilya showcased his grappling a little bit. He said he wouldn't, he would strike and do the whole pointing down thing, but as a good fighter with good fight IQ, he definitely showcased his grappling. Now, rewatching this fight, Max definitely did way better than I remember, honestly speaking. And he put up a tough fight, a tough test to Ilya Tuporia before the inevitable end. But yeah, very back and forth, constant action, a brutal finish. You knocked out Max Holloway. Nobody has knocked out Max Holloway. He's barely been knocked down. High stakes in the fight, very tense fight. Like I said, constant back and forth, ending up with a finish. Now, this was the second time that Ilya Tuporia was knocking out a GOAT in the featherweight division in the same year. Action-packed fights, non-stop, ending up with a finish. This is absolutely a need to watch type fights. Next fight, we got Amanda Lemos versus Mackenzie Dern. Now, this fight was hard to rank as well because it was between a might rewatch and a one-sided banger. But rewatching the fight, man, there was a lot of beatdown from Amanda Lemos. So it was action-packed, like I said. Dern had some good moments showing her great jiu-jitsu skills in round 1, but for the most part in round 2 and round 3 it was mostly Lemos putting on a beat down, but Dern was just too tough to go out. And also having good moments. She kept on having good moments, showcasing her jiu-jitsu, being defensive and actually having close moments to a submission on the ground, but Lemos kept on putting that beat down. Action fight, but for the most part it was one-sided. With that being said, after rewatching it, it's definitely something that has to fall into the one-sided banger. Now, it's definitely a fight to rewatch. The one-sided bangers are fights to rewatch, but it's more showcasing Amanda Lemos, performance on that fight than the fight as a whole. Next fight, we have Shirley City versus Ramon Tavares 2. Man, this was such a good fight. It turned slowly from a technical striking fight to a brawl. The next thing, both guys were bleeding. City still fighting back and arguably winning round 2. Constant back and forth striking match. Beautiful striking match right here. This is one of those hidden gem fights that may be forgotten because both guys are still down in the rankings and they're not like top fighters or anything like that, but it's an absolute banger of a fight. Both guys looked real good in this fight, even though Tavares missed weight by 4 pounds. So City didn't even have to take this fight, but he did. And it was actually a rematch as City had a knockout in their first fight, but I believe it was like a controversial knockout or something like that. So they're 1-1, and I see these guys fighting again in the future. But yeah, they're not the biggest names in the UFC, but it was a banger. One of those fights that starts off slow, but slowly just turns to a bloody banger fight. This absolutely is a need to watch category for sure. Next fight, we have Royval versus Taira. Man, this was one of the most technical fights I watched in 2024. Absolute technicality mixed with brawling, and everything was in this fight. Technical grappling, technical striking, defensive grappling, back and forth action. And I believe Taira was winning this fight initially, but it was amazing to watch Royval slowly come back, show that he was a tougher fighter. Honestly, that's how this fight was determined. It was about who the tougher fighter was, because both guys, top fighters, very technical, both very talented, but Royval proved to be the tougher dog in that fight. Absolute banger of a fight. Both guys showcased a lot of skills. They showcase how well-rounded they are. Now, Taira obviously is way better with his submissions and ground game than he is on the feet, which Royval absolutely took advantage of. But it was impressive to see Royval be defensively sound on the ground. So like I said, both guys this is one of the fights where they showcased their talent more than any other fight that they've had, honestly speaking. Action packed back and forth non-stop. You can't take your eyes off this fight. This has to go into the need to rewatch category. It didn't end with a finish, but the technicality was just amazing. Say that this fight absolutely needs to go before Tavares versus City fight, because the technicality was just way better. It was more fun in my opinion, and it included all the skills in MMA, honestly speaking. So yeah, a need to watch fight. Absolute need to watch fight. Next fight, we have Dustin Poirier versus Benoit Saint Denis. Man, this was an awesome fight. A tense fight because Dustin Poirier is one of my favorite fighters. I literally made a video talking about how this fight was gonna play out, and that's exactly what happened. Poirier faced a lot of danger in round one with Benoit Saint Denis taking him to the ground, dominating him on the ground, almost submitting him. But in my video, I talked about how Dustin Poirier has already faced the most dangerous, ground game martial arts in the lightweight division, maybe aside from Islam, but I'm talking about Khabib. So I feel like with his experience in those type of situations, he'll be able to survive whatever Benoit Saint Denis was gonna bring to him, and he did just that in round one. Round two came back, made it a brawl, made it a striking match. Benoit Saint Denis thought he could go hand in hand with Dustin Poirier, and he got checked. Landed a nice hook, dropped him the first time, and then ended up knocking out. One of the best knockouts, one of the best comeback moments in 2024, and just an action-packed fight from beginning to end. It had grappling, it had striking, it ended up in a finish. So this is an absolute need to watch fight. I would also put this honestly in the as the fourth best fight in this category, as it was just it had technicality and then it had brawling in it, striking, grappling, both technical, both brawlers, and ending up in a fantastic finish. Next on the list, we have Stephen Nguyen versus Jaron Ennis. I'm just gonna say it straight up, this is an absolute need to watch fight. Just like Tavares versus City, this was a technical striking match, constant back and forth from both guys, of course, from round one all through the end of the fight. This fight ended up being a bloody brawl in the third round, and Aarons pretty much won all three rounds, but Nguyen made it a tough fight, having great moments as well, and slowly turning from a technical striking fight to a brawl. Banger, both guys bleeding at the end, back and forth action. Just when you think they're about to slow down, both guys keep going forward. And again, this is a hidden gem, and it's one of those fights where, because they're not the biggest names, you might not think about it often, but it's a need to watch fight. If you want to watch a fun MMA fight, it absolutely is. I do believe it was a better fight than Tavares versus City, so this fight, no doubt, is a need to watch fight. Next fight, we have Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. Absolute banger of a fight. This fight had everything: technicality, heart, brawling, grappling, striking, everything, ending up with a shocking finish. Like, the fight started, and I believe at first Dricus was winning the fight. Both guys going back and forth. Dricus landing his overhead shots, kicks. Adesanya putting up a beautiful striking fight, except he wasn't kicking that much. I don't know why. Dricus landing a lot of takedowns, but Israel Adesanya defending well, getting back up. But then slowly Israel started winning the fight. He actually started winning the fight. I believe I don't know if he was up on the judges card, but he was winning that fight. His striking just kept getting better. I think he figured Dricus' game plan, but then eventually Dricus ended up landing a powerful shot that rocked Izzy, and Izzy tried to defend and run away a little bit, and Dricus just chased him down, stayed on him, put him to the ground, and finished with a shocking submission. This fight is one of those fights where you don't want to take your eyes off. You want to see every moment. A pure example of why we are addicted to this as a combat sport fan. This is a fight that you would show people to say, hey, watch this fight, and you see why MMA is so fun. So, with that being said, this absolutely is a hood classic. Right now, the second best hood classic on this list. Up next, we have Mateusz Gamrot versus Dan Hooker. Man, this was shockingly a banger of a fight. Not in the way I expected it. Like, styles make fights, and I knew this was gonna be a banger of a fight, but I thought it was gonna be the classic grappler versus striker fight because Gamrot is a very, very good grappler, but I think he wanted to prove something, wanted to prove he could hold his own on the feet. And this actually ended up being a striker's delight. Gamrot was pretty much like, man, forget this grappling stuff. Went and swang and banged with Dan Hooker. Pause. I think he did attempt some takedowns here and there, but Dan Hooker did a good job defending it. Dan Hooker was bloodied in the fight as usual. In my opinion, I think Gamrot edged this fight and won the fight, but it was such a close fight, and I wasn't too mad that they gave it to Dan Hooker because at some point it looked like he was landing the more impactful shots. It looked like Gamrot was more exhausted in the fight. So from an aesthetics point of view, I could see why the judges gave it to Dan Hooker. But yeah, absolute banger, back and forth. You would think is one of those fights where Gamrot is trying to grapple and then Hooker is just a striker, but both guys went back and forth with the striking. Bloody fight, technical fight, ending up being a brawl. This is an absolute need to watch for sure. And I'm honestly going to put this in the fourth position because this was such a good back and forth fight. It didn't end with a finish, so maybe I'll just put it in the fifth position after Poirier and BSD. But it was such a fantastic fight, an absolute need to watch fight. Next, we have Jiri Prochazka versus Alexander Rakic. Man, such a great fight. One of those fights where, Rakic was winning the fight, putting on the striking clinic, back and forth. It was a back and forth fight. Both guys were going back and forth, putting on a striking good performance, all that. But it looked like Jiri was, declining. Rakic kept looking better and better, and then out of nowhere, as most Jiri fights goes, he eats all the shots, takes everything you have, and then comes back and just gives you everything he has. Fantastic, one of the best comebacks that I watched this year. I honestly think it might have been a better comeback than Poirier versus Benoit Saint-Denis. It's really, really close, but it was a more action-packed fight, a very eventful fight. It was like the fight was being close to being stopped so many times, but Jiri, just a tough guy. Of course, his fight style is not gonna last long if he keeps doing the thing where he receives the shots and then just comes back, tougher and whatever. But it worked out in this fight. Ended up knocking out Alexander Rakic. This fight had everything, non-stop action, back and forth from the beginning to the end, ending up in a crazy comeback KO. This right here is something you want to show anybody, both MMA fans and non-MMA fans, to show them an example. So in my opinion, this is absolutely a hood classic, no doubts. Next fight, we have Mateusz Rebecki versus Maitabek Orobai. Banger, absolute banger of a fight. This was one of those fights where it started off being technical, guys going back and forth, but slowly turning to a bloody, gruesome brawl of a fight. Like, take a look at Orobai's face at the end of that fight. One eye looked like a head on top of his eye. It was absolutely gruesome. I hope that doesn't affect him at the end of his career. But Rebecca was also bloodied as well. Even though Orobai looked like that in like what, round 3 or round 2 from the fight, he was still putting it on with one eye closed. Guys going back and forth, a banger of a fight. And honestly, I don't know how this fight ended up with a decision, but this was a gruesome fight. Man, like it's one of those fights where you want to show people that these MMA fighters, they're a different breed of humans. They're not normal people, because the damage that was caused in that fight, oof, I don't even know if this is a fight you show your friends that don't watch MMA. They might actually run away from it because it might be too gruesome. But this right here is a hidden gem hood classic, no doubt. Gruesome fight, technical fight, ending up being gruesome, bloody, brawl, nasty. Didn't end with a finish, but man, absolute hood classic. This is a fight that will always be talked about. This is a fight that you can always go back anytime to watch for sure. All right, next fight we have Vinicius Oliveira versus Bernardo Sopaj. Absolute need to watch fight. Straight up, I'm just gonna say it. Another fun fight, of course. Oliveira starting off well. Round 1, landing a lot of good kicks, but Sopaj holding his own, going back and forth. It wasn't no slouch. He wasn't just standing there taking damage, but Oliveira was putting on a good performance starting from round 1. Now, in round 2, Sopaj totally started dominating with his wrestling, but in the last 2 minutes, Oliveira reversed it. Things got crazy and he started landing crazy ground and pounds, and probably ended up making the round a draw, or honestly arguably winning the round if you're being honest. But then in round 3, Oliveira absolutely took over, dominating the round with strikes and finishing the fight with one of the most brutal flying knee knockouts. If not for the amazing knockout that Holloway had against Gaethje, this hands down to me is the second best knockout of 2024. So with that being said, this absolutely falls in the need to watch category right before right before Tavares and City. Next fight we have Petr Yan versus Song Yadong. Great fight, back and forth, both guys showcasing their skill to the highest. A very good striking fight. Not a lot of grappling involved because both guys are primarily strikers. Now, this fight is where Petr Yan showed that there is levels to this, because Song Yadong is a very good fighter, powerful striker, knocks people out, but Petr Yan just showed his dynamic striking, the regular thing where round 1, he sees what your game plan is and then he breaks you down slowly, just still in the round. A very, very tough fight. Ended up being a little bloody as well, but not that gruesome, honestly speaking, but it was a banger of a fight. Now, this is a fight that might be lost in the weeds, but when people mention those two guys, you would definitely remember this fight. You definitely think about this fight. It didn't end with a finish or anything, and there wasn't this crazy moments or anything like that. So I initially wanted to put it in the need to rewatch, but after rewatching it, I think it's more appropriate in the might rewatch category, because it didn't really have any big moments like that, but it was absolutely a very, very good fight. Next, we have Alex Pereira versus Khalil Rountree. I mean, come on, man. I'm not even gonna play with you guys. We all know, if you've watched this fight, this is an absolute hood classic. Strikers, virtuoso performance from both guys. It's crazy because this was actually Alex Pereira's greatest test, his toughest fight ever. Arguably, in fact, it's not arguably. Khalil Rountree was winning that fight. I think round 1, and he might have won round 2. Striking, putting it on Alex Pereira, putting the pressure, going forward, guys going back and forth. But then it was just amazing to watch Alex Pereira figure out Khalil's game, show that he had heart. We all know Alex Pereira is a tough man. Of course, he has heart, but this was his heart on the biggest display. Came back, started landing clean on Roundtree. Roundtree was so tough, took all the shots, paused, but was still standing in there. Eventually, he broke Roundtree down and just he ended up as a TKO. He shelled up at the end because there's only so much you can take from Alex Pereira. He's such a powerful striker. So it was amazing to watch Roundtree winning the fight, but then Alex Pereira slowly come back and then put on a amazing striking performance, and then ending up finishing the fight, breaking down Khalil Roundtree. This right here is an absolute hood classic. It has to come in as the third hood classic, right before Yuri versus Rakic, because it was more action packed in my opinion. An absolute hood classic. Next fight, we have Drew Dober versus Jean Silva. Man, this was almost put in the category of a one-sided banger, but Drew Dober held his own for sure and had good moments. But man, this ended up being a bloody, nasty fight on one side. Drew Dober, he had one of the most gruesome injuries I've seen in MMA with his eye. It was just ended up being terrible to look at, but it was an absolute banger of a fight. Jean Silva putting on a full display of his skills, striking fight, back and forth action, going forward, and Silva ended up winning by a knockout. Amazing fight to watch, amazing performance to watch, but Drew Dober held his own, so I can't call it a one-sided banger, but this right here is an absolute need to watch. Right after Tatsuro Taira versus Brandon Royval. Next fight, we have Islam Makhachev versus Dustin Poirier. This is a fight where Makhachev fully showcased his skill set, both in striking and grappling. Dustin Poirier honestly did better than I imagined he would do, hanging in there, constantly defending everything coming at him. Islam had to dig deep in this fight. He really had to, because Dustin definitely tested him. But then Islam would end the fight with a Darce choke submission in round 5. This fight had everything you wanted. Striking, beautiful striking performance from both guys, honestly. Amazing grappling from Islam, and amazing defense from Dustin. Technical fights, brawl, and then ending up with a very, very good finish at the 5th round. Like, there was nothing more you could ask for this fight. This right here absolutely falls in the hood classic for sure. Now I think I'll put it before Ruberki versus Orubai. Next fight, we have Cobb Swanson versus Billy Conatillo. This fight was honestly, it ended up being about who had the best chin so far in their career, and it ended up being Cobb Swanson. Absolute strikers fight, both guys back and forth, landing, volume, powerful strikes, and then Cobb Swanson, of course, eventually ending a fantastic knockout to end the year. I think he was gonna retire, but this performance pretty much, inspired him, which of course it would anybody. But yeah, this was a banger of a fight. It didn't last that long, so with that being said, it absolutely has to fall into the need to watch category for sure. Next fight, we have Petr Yan versus Deiveson Figueiredo. Absolute banger of a fight. When this matchup was announced, I just knew what it was going to be, and it was absolutely that. Both guys going back and forth. Figueiredo looking good in bantamweight, but Yan showing there's levels to this. Honestly, Figueiredo had so many amazing moments as well, which made it a banger of a fight, and I like the respect that both guys showed each other. Yan defended any grappling that Deiveson was gonna instill and just kept on going forward. Both guys going back and forth. Absolute banger of a fight. It didn't end with a finish, but I don't think it's fair to put this in a might rewatch. This is something you have to put in a need to watch category because Peter Yan really showed himself in this fight, showed how good it is, and it was a very, very good technical fight. So I'm gonna put this right after Drew Dober versus Gene Silva. This absolutely is a need to watch fight. Next, we have Jared Cannonier versus Kyle Barrio. I almost put this in a one-sided banger, but I rewatched it and I was like, wait, what am I talking about? Cannonier absolutely held his own. In fact, there were moments where I felt like he might have been winning the fight, but man, Barrio, the younger fighter, the fresher fighter, it was all about who wanted it more, who was fresher. Cannonier, in my opinion, might be entering the category of his washed era, but I'm not counting him out yet. But yeah, Barrio put on a very, very good performance. Back and forth striking, both guys landing power shots. Barrio taking everything that Cannonier brought and then doubling it. Honestly speaking, this was a very, very good fight to watch and a very good performance, honestly. So I'm gonna put this in the need to watch. The need to watch category is getting full, but man, that's why these are the best fights in 2024. You know, they're all good fights, they're all amazing fights, and you know, the best top 30. So of course, this falls in the need to watch category. Next fight, we have Corey Sandhagen versus Umar Nurmagomedov. This, come on, straight up one-sided banger. I thought this was gonna be a closer fight as both guys very, very good strikers, but then Umar has the wrestling as well. And I thought, you know, it would be a close fight where they're both close on the feet, but then Umar would have to wrestle a bit. But man, Umar ended up schooling Corey Sandhagen of all people on the feet. I don't know if Corey had an off night or something. He held his own. He didn't get finished or anything, and he survived, but it was kind of sort of a disappointing performance from Corey Sandhagen. But I did pick Umar to win, but not the way he did, honestly speaking. It was one-sided. I believe Umar won all 5 rounds, which was like really crazy to see, but it was very, very fun to watch Umar in his full elements, put on both his grappling and striking skills and in full display and totally dominating Corey Sandhagen. Now, in terms of the how interesting this was, I think I have to put it as number 3 because Dern versus Limos, I feel like that was more action packed and there was more back and forth. Sean O'Malley versus Vera 2, I think Sean O'Malley put on more of a striking clinic than Umar did against Corey Sandhagen. Of course, the opponents we're facing, I think Corey Sandhagen is way better than Vera, so I can't blame him for that. But yeah, I think this falls in as number 3 in the one-sided banger. Next, we have Charles Oliveira versus Michael Chandler 2. This fight was pretty much Oliveira showing that he still got it, putting on good striking, good grappling, and Michael Chandler just finding every way to cheat, honestly speaking. But I don't think it's a fight I'm interested in going back to watch. The story was pretty much straightforward. I don't know if Michael Chandler won any round. I almost put this in a one-sided banger, but rewatching it, there was no crazy moment aside from the time that Chandler, Oliveira was on Chandler's back and Chandler would fly in the air and land. You know, it's not even doing anything, but he just kept doing that. Like I said, cheating throughout the fight, back of the head shots, grabbing the fence. What didn't he do? But that was the story of the fight. But it wasn't boring, you know. It was exciting, but nothing crazy. So this has to come in second as a decent fight. In the second to the last fight we're going to be talking about is Chairez versus Joshua Van. Now, this was a fun fight with Chairez having a good, absolutely good round 1, looking good and technical, landing a lot of shots, landing a knockdown as well. But then Joshua Van just came in round 2 as a new fighter, landing volumes of powerful shots, body shots, piecing off Chairez, but then Chairez striking back at times. Round 2 was an absolute banger going into round 3 as well. Constant action with striking and grappling in all rounds, with Van stealing round 3 as well as winning a unanimous decision. So the most interesting part of this fight was round 2, but what makes the fight great as a whole is the fact that Van absolutely lost the first round, but then just came back as like he was a rejuvenated fighter or something. Absolutely dominated round 2. Round 3 was close, but Van definitely won round 3 as well, which made him win the fight. Now, this was a banger of a fight, but nothing too crazy. I wouldn't say you're missing much from this fight, so I will put this in a might rewatch category as the last one. Last but not the least fight we'll be talking about is Marcus McGhee versus Bolanos. Now, this fight was amazing to watch, but this was more of a Marcus McGhee performance. Honestly, he faced Bolanos, who is a technical kickboxer, but the way he broke him down and then turned it into a brawl was fascinating to watch, honestly speaking. Bolanos landed good shots, but McGhee kept dominating. McGhee absolutely owned round 2, put it on a striking clinic and finishing the fight with a TKO. This was a hard one between might rewatch and one-sided banger, but rewatching it, I have to put it as a one-sided banger because this is where McGhee really showed his skills and made more of an announcement that he's definitely a danger in this division. So yeah, this absolutely has to go into the one-sided banger category. With it ending in a nice finish, I think it has to come in as the first fight in the one-sided banger. But yeah, guys, these are the top 30 fights in 2024 in the UFC ranked. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know what you disagree with, which ones you agree with, which categories you think have to switch, or where you think I'm wrong. And let me know what you believe the best fight in 2024 is in the UFC or MMA in general. I really like to know your opinions on this. But if you've reached this part of the video, thank you so much. I appreciate you. Please don't forget to like the video, subscribe. With that being said, thank you so much. I'll see you guys later.